Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into the recent SCO, that's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defense Ministers meeting. It was held in Qingdao, China.
Right, and this one felt pretty significant.
Yeah, it wasn't just routine, was it? It marked China's turn as president, and actually, it was the biggest defense ministers meeting they've had since Belarus joined as a full member just last year in 2024.
Absolutely. We've really tried to dig into the details of this summit, pull out the core insights for you.
So our mission today is to clarify what this gathering means for regional stability.
Yeah, focusing on those big themes like counterterrorism and also the subtle shifts maybe happening in the India-China defense relationship.
It does raise questions, doesn't it? Can a group like the SCO, with all its internal differences, really unite against shared threats?
Or is it more about, strategic positioning for each member? That's kind of what we want to explore.
Okay, so let's get into the core message then. Beyond who was there, what was the underlying spirit driving the summit?
Well, they made a big push to talk about the Shanghai spirit.
Right, SCO's founding principles, mutual trust, inclusivity, regional stability.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how they're emphasizing that now, especially with new members like Iran on board. It feels like a deliberate signal about how they view global governance.
Kind of positioning themselves, maybe?
Sort of. And centering on security themes that go beyond just standard military cooperation. Almost like an alternative to Western-led security ideas.
Makes sense. And a huge focus right from the start was this coordinated action against, well, the usual suspects.
Yeah.
Terrorism, extremism.
Drug trafficking, transnational crime. Yeah.
And India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and the NSA Ajit Doval, they were particularly vocal on this.
They really were. India definitely pushed for more targeted action on terrorism, but also dialogue for peace.
Doval's comment about shunning double standards stood out.
It really did. A very clear, though maybe indirect, reference to, well, certain countries perhaps overlooking some groups while condemning others.
Which brings up that fundamental question, doesn't it? How can you cooperate effectively against terrorism if you don't fully trust each other on who the terrorists actually are?
Exactly. Trust is key.
And speaking of trust, that leads us to maybe the most interesting development for me.
Singh's visit.
Yeah, Rajnath Singh being there. He was the first senior Indian official to visit China since that whole 2020 line of actual control, the LAC, standoff, that border clash.
That's huge.
Why is that such a big deal, you think?
Well, look, it's more than just diplomatic appearances. It's potentially a really critical opening.
An opening for what?
For military leaders from two nuclear powers to actually talk directly, to manage tensions, maybe prevent future flare-ups. It suggests a cautious thaw.
So using the multilateral setting to try and rebuild some bilateral confidence?
Precisely. Trying to normalize military relations a bit, open those channels again. It's really about de-risking a very volatile relationship.
Okay, so the meeting itself, it brought together all 10 SCO defense chiefs, plus Iran now as a full member.
Right. And the discussions were focused on things like better military coordination, joint exercises like peace mission.
And using RATS, the regional anti-terrorism structure.
Yeah, RATS is basically the SCO's operational arm for counter-terror stuff. It's central.
But it's always a balancing act in these forums, isn't it? National interests versus collective goals.
Absolutely. You saw that with Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Asif. He described the SCO as a tool for safeguarding development.
Emphasizing the non-military side.
Exactly. He explicitly said it wasn't a military alliance, which kind of reaffirms the SCO's identity, or at least the identity they want to project.
So less NATO, more a collective security network focused on specific threats, like terrorism.
That seems to be the line they're pushing, yeah. It's about their internal messaging as much as anything else.
So boiling it down, what does this all mean for you, watching how things are shaping up in the region?
Well, there was broad agreement, apparently, on boosting information sharing, intelligence coordination.
Launching more joint initiatives through RTs.
Right. And institutionalizing those counterterrorism efforts more. And India was quite active in pushing that agenda.
So it seems like this meeting built some momentum. For defense diplomacy, at least.
I think so. Using these multilateral platforms to try and rebuild some regional trust, even where bilateral ties are tricky.
And it sets the stage for the bigger heads of state summit, doesn't it? Tianjin in autumn 2025.
Yeah, definitely builds towards that. They'll hope to cement some of these steps there, discuss the broader agendas.
What a deep dive. I mean, from India really calling out those double standards on terror.
Which was quite pointed.
To this potential small shift, maybe a turning point, In India-China defense ties, it felt packed with implications.
I think the key takeaway is seeing the SKO's role evolve. It's really trying to position itself as this collective security network, adapting to, well, a very uncertain global picture.
Not just a military bloc in the old sense.
No, it's more about how these diverse nations try to understand and tackle shared threats together, even while, managing their own significant differences.
It really makes you wonder, though, how much can these big multilateral meetings actually bridge those deep, long-standing bilateral tensions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And what new kinds of cooperation might actually bubble up as the SCO keeps changing and growing? Definitely something for you to think about until our next deep dive.